Hello, BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. So this week, I'm working on the same four books I've been working on for forever now. The grammar book, an ESL/EFL teacher's course by Marianne Celce-Murcia and Diane Larsen-Freeman. The Complete Stories of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This particular week, The Road to Oz. The Histories by Herodotus. And The Fellowship of the Rings, part of the Lord of the Rings Hobbit box set. Okay, so the last week, the last 2 weeks actually, I have made apologies and excuses for not getting a lot of reading done, and said I've been very busy and predicted that I would be quite busy for some time to come. And I have been quite busy this week. It's been a very busy week with both work and with this online course that I'm doing for my own professional education and family-wise. So between all three of those, it's been it's been quite a week. So with that out of the way, I'm going to make apologies for not having gotten a lot done this week. Why don't I start with the book I read the least, which is once again the grammar book. So I went all week without reading this, and then just yesterday read 4 pages, pages 234 to 238. And mostly that's just for the sake of just trying to keep this book in rotation. Just to say I read at least a couple pages this past week. Earlier in this year, I went for over a month without touching it. And I don't want to do that again. I want to keep chipping away at it a little bit each week. But it's not really an ideal way to read this book. I just kind of absorbing it in drips and drabs doesn't really feel like you're learning a lot. What I really should do is sit down and devote more of my attention to this book. And I have this idea that if the COVID lockdown ever finishes up and we go back to actually working in the office, then maybe I can, because it's professional development, I can set aside 45 minutes after lunch every day to study it, like seriously study this book. Although I don't know, I've been wondering, because even when you immerse yourself in a book like this, you don't permanently retain everything in it. A few weeks later, you'll have forgotten half of it or something like that. So I'm wondering if just reading a little bit each week, and as I'm reading a little bit each week, of course, I'm forgetting what happened during the weeks before. But I wonder if in the long term, that's almost just the same as reading this intensively and then forgetting it all a couple weeks later. I don't know. Something that I've been noticing repeatedly with a book like this, because a book like this is a lot of grammatical information, which is very good and useful information, but retention is the key. So I'm noticing my lack of retention with a book like this. And I'm especially noticing it because for at least the first 10 chapters or so, I read it last year and then stopped reading it and then picked it up again. And it was discouraging to realize how little I retained from the previous year. Anyways, for this week, finished up the section on the imperatives. And the teaching suggestions here, and then just got a little bit into the exercises at the end. which I need to finish up for this week. We'll see how this week goes. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, this whole month is going to be busy. So we'll see. We'll see. The other book is Herodotus, and this is another book that I was making very good progress on initially, but then after I got distracted by other books, this has been on the back burner, and it's a book that I've just been reading a few pages of a week. And this is another one I feel bad about, because I think with a book like this, these kind of famous classic books, you can read them in drips and drabs like I've been doing, but you're not really getting the whole experience as if I would to try and sit down and absorb myself in these great books. Although, I don't know. I mean, for one thing, I'm not sure I have the attention span to do that. I've always suffered from short attention spans, even when I was younger. I was attracted to books, but I always read them in very small spurts, a few pages here, a few pages there. That was even before the days of the internet and Facebook and Twitter and social media. I think my attention span has become worse because of the internet and social media. And besides that, I am now at a stage in my life where I'm not sure I have a lot of time, that hours at one stretch to sit down and try and immerse myself in a book like this, not with being busy with work and 2 kids and all this stuff. I may have missed my chance to try and absorb myself fully in a book like this. But I can still read it in drips and drabs. So this week I read 16 pages, which is better than last week. I think last week I had 6 pages. So finished up the end of book 4 and into book 5. Now, the end of book 4, Herodotus is giving his ethnography of all the different people who live in the land of Libya, which I guess Libya means northern Africa in Herodotus's day. I don't know if you can see that map, but this is Libya here. My geography is terrible, so I tend to be relying on these maps a lot. Like he was talking about the people situated around the lake, or the peoples situated around, the lake Tritonus over here. And, I didn't even know there were lakes in this area of Africa. Shows how bad my geography is. But it was interesting, of course, to hear about, there's this island here in the lake and the different civilizations. Herodotus is famous for going on and on, giving all these ethnographic surveys of far-flung reaches of the world that he never actually went to himself. He's just all relying on travelers' reports. And it gets pretty ridiculous. It gets really ridiculous. Of course, that's half the fun of reading Herodotus, isn't it? For these ridiculous ethnographic surveys. Yeah, where is it? Where is it? There's one here. He's talking about. Sorry. I should have marked this before I turned on the video. He talks about, people who have. Oh yeah, here we go. He says, there are men with the heads of dogs, and others who have no heads at all, whose eyes are set in their chests, So you imagine this region in somewhere in northern Africa, people walking around with the heads of dogs, and other people with no heads at all, but they have their eyes in their chests, and I don't know, presumably maybe the rest of their face in their chest as well. And then he does say, or so it is claimed by the Libyans, which is typical Herodotus. He'll tell you all these wild stories, and then he'll say, well, who knows? This is what I was told. Is it true or not? But he loves reporting these fantastic stories that he's been told, all about these strange animals and these strange men and women and all the customs that they have here. And that it ends with the conquest of some of Libya by the Persians. And then starting on book 5. And book 5, again, the divisions into books is not something Herodotus did. That's something translator Tom Holland makes very clear, that the divisions into chapters and books happened after Herodotus's time. But book 5 is back to Europe, or I guess what was considered Asia at that time, kind of the Persia and the Hellespont, and conquering the Persians, conquering into Thrace and getting into Macedonia. So very, very close to the Greek world now. And I think I am actually very close to getting to the meat of this book. 344 pages in now, very close to actually getting into the conflict between the Persians and the Greeks, which is what this whole book has been leading up to. I think that's going to take center stage starting in book 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So, yeah, getting there. Again, what I really should try and do is try and spend more time just absorbing myself in this book, but it's something I have a difficult time doing, and I'm always checking the notes at the end and checking the maps, trying to figure out where things are. So it's slow going, but I had a stretch on Saturday where I was free in the morning. And was able to read 16 pages then, and do find it interesting when I allow myself to get into it. So I'm going to keep checking away at Herodotus. The next book is finishing up The Road to Oz, which I finished... When did I finish this? Friday or Saturday? I don't actually remember. Maybe I finished on Friday. Yeah, I think it was Friday. So this is something I'm doing with Dane Reads over at his channel. And I finished this book on Friday, but have not yet filmed my review of it, partially because the schedule Dane and I have agreed to is every 2 weeks on a Monday, release our review of the Oz books. So I'll film my review of this either tonight or tomorrow, and try and release it Monday, Monday my time over here in Vietnam, whenever that ends up being for the rest of the world. And because of that, I don't want to talk too much about this, because I'm going to try and pour out all my thoughts into the video, which I'll film tonight or tomorrow. But I will talk a little bit. And I mean, fair warning, probably everything I say now I'm going to repeat a little bit later when I film the actual video review of this, which is how these weekly reading vlogs work. The content overlaps heavily with the main video reviews. Yeah, Dane has not, I think, posted his video review yet, but he's posted a written review on his website, which I'll try and remember to link to, in which he said, okay, this is the first time in this series that I'm actually starting to wonder what I've gotten myself into, or if this series is going to be worth sticking with, I think was the implication of what he said. He's been enjoying it so far, but he found The Road to Oz pretty boring. And that's actually that's my review as well. In fact, I'm glad Dane said it first, because I was a little bit worried about ripping into this book too much, because if you're doing this with a buddy read with somebody else and it turns out they really love that book, and you rip into it, then maybe that's a little bit awkward. But now that he's come out first and said that he didn't really like this one, I agree that The Road to Oz seems to be a low point. Although it's maybe premature to say, because this is only book 5 in. We've got 15 books here, just with the L. Frank Baum books. But for most of it, there are no stakes. They're just going on a journey and meeting various things. They're in very little danger except for one encounter. And then they get to Oz, and then it's just one extended Ozma birthday party. What is interesting, though, about The Road to Oz is L. Frank Baum was using it as a way to tie in his other fantasy series. So there are about... He wrote a lot of other children's books besides the Oz books, none of which were as successful as Oz. And something he was constantly trying to do, for I don't know why, was constantly trying to launch another successful fantasy series. I mean, I don't know why he just didn't say to himself, okay, well, I've got the Oz series. That's good enough. And in any, and it's a fantasy world, so there's a fair degree of flexibility there. Any fantasy story you want to tell, you can just tell within the land of Oz, or within the Oz series. I mean, quite frequently what he does is he'll start the story in some sort of magical land that's next to the land of Oz. And if he's already doing that anyways, already having his stories start off in a fantasy land next to the land of Oz. I mean, the Road to Oz, Dorothy and her friends journey through several fantasy lands on their way into Oz. So he's already doing that anyways. Why not just take the other stories he wants to tell and put them in the Oz series? But yeah, for whatever reason, he was trying to get another successful fantasy series launched. At Ozma's birthday party, he brings in his characters from his other books. And there are 4 other books. Or 4 other kind of, sorry, I was going to say series, but they're not series. They're standalone books. I think he had ambitions to make them into series, maybe. But 4 other books with 4 other fantasy worlds. And he brings these characters into Ozma's birthday party. So they all show up and they say hi to the characters in Oz, and they get a seat at the table with Ozma's birthday. And from like a standard narrative standpoint, it's quite boring, because it's just like, okay, so-and-so showed up and he said, oh, Ozma, happy birthday, here's a present. And then he got a seat at the table, and then so-and-so showed up and they were like, hello, Ozma, so good to see you. And everyone was happy to see them. And then so-and-so showed up. It doesn't really make for an engaging plot. But as somebody who, for whatever reason, has always been fascinated by expanded fantasy worlds, I find this idea of the expanded Oz universe fascinating. All these different lands that L. Frank Baum was trying to tie in to his Greater Oz series. And I believe there's a map that came out with one of his later books. I think it was Tick-Tock of Oz, according to Wikipedia, which is a few books down the road yet. Let's see, we're on book 5. Tick-Tock is 6, 7, 8, 9. Tick-Tock is going to be book 9 in the series. They finally put everything together on a map, so you can see Oz is in the middle. Then surrounding Oz is the great and deadly desert, which if you touch the sand, you die. But of course, there are ways of getting across it. You fly over, or you go over on a sand boat or something like that. And then there are all these other fantasy lands on the outside of that desert, which are part of the Oz extended universe. So I find that aspect of it fascinating. One thing, though, in terms of reading these books, at least this book, I don't know about other editions, but, the publishers don't give you a lot of help in terms of connecting those dots. So figuring out where these other characters are coming from and what the history of them is, and the different fantasy books that L. Frank Baum is tying in here, involves a lot of legwork on Wikipedia. So you're reading through and you're saying, okay, so here's a character I've never heard of before. And then you go to Google and you Google that character, and then the Wikipedia page will show up, and you'll be like, oh, okay, so this character is from a book L. Frank Baum published in 1905 about this particular story or something like that. So it's a little bit research heavy for a silly little book like this. I mean, when I'm reading Herodotus, I'm quite often going to Wikipedia to look up this or that. But that's Herodotus. It's not quite, shouldn't be quite the same amount of work to keep track of what's happening in the Land of Oz stories, and yet it often is. And yet, if you're a geek, I don't know why, but we geeks love this stuff. I remember when I was into comic books when I was 14, and how obsessive comic books fans get about figuring out the continuity and where these characters are from and which issue they first appeared in and what their various history is. It's all much easier nowadays with Wikipedia. Back in the early 90s when I was trying to sort my way through the history of comic books, you just had to search the back issues of the store. But for whatever reason, those of us who are geeks love figuring out these puzzle pieces. I don't know why, but we do, don't we? So if you're that way inclined, and I am, then it is kind of fun going to Wikipedia and figuring out these puzzle pieces and figuring out, okay, which, of the other books, because when you go to Wikipedia as well, it'll not only say, okay, these characters appeared in L. Frank Baum's The Road to Oz, but then, this character also made a cameo later in book 33 in the Oz series, and figuring out what the various connections are there. So, and then speaking of geek books, The Fellowship of the Rings. So this was the book I made the most progress on this week, from page 250 to page 336. 86 pages. 86 pages is good for me, at my reading pace with my attention span. And as with the previous weeks, I am enjoying this book a lot. But one of the reasons I made so much progress on it, relative progress, is because these three books are heavy and cumbersome, whereas this one is quite light. Quite easy to pick up, where while I'm waiting for my daughter to finish her bath, I'll just read a couple pages, or quite easy to pick up in the morning at breakfast, or while I'm eating a sandwich at lunch, or something like that. Just the ease of picking this up and holding it. So I was just talking about the pleasures nerds take in tracking down continuity, and this book is full of that, and more and more so as you get deeper into it, and especially the sections I've read this week, in both a fascinating and a frustrating way. I mean, it's fascinating because there's obviously a much bigger world being built up than the linear story that's happening in this book. And there are references to Gondor and Gondolin and Numenor, and some of these names I vaguely remember from The Hobbit. I think The Hobbit was talking about swords that came from Gondor, something like that. I don't remember clearly. And some of these, I think, come from the Silmarillion. And the only reason I know this is because I watched some of Steve Donahue's videos on the Silmarillion. So I'm somewhat familiar with the content from Steve Donahue's summary of it. Like the romance between the human and the elf queen that happened long, long ago. I think I recognize that from what Steve Donahue was saying about the Silmarillion. It's taken me late in life to get into these books. Here I am just reading it now at middle age instead of reading it when I was 12, like you're supposed to do. But now that I'm getting into it, I do feel the urge to just keep getting into it. I don't know how much luck I'm going to have tracking down these books here in Vietnam, but it would be interesting to track down the Silmarillion or some of the other Tolkien Middle Earth books that got released after his death. Maybe I'll look into seeing how well I can track those down. At the same time, though, there is constantly a sense of like, okay, am I missing something? Who was that old king again? And I'm trying really hard not to go to Wikipedia, which, with these books I go to Wikipedia, with Herodotus or The Land of Oz, but I really don't want to be thinking about the Peter Jackson movie or the other stuff. I want to try and get into the world that's built up here. I've gone to Wikipedia a little bit, but want to try and just absorb myself in the book. But yeah, there are kingdoms here and names of old kings that were mentioned earlier, and I don't think I took enough note of them when they were mentioned earlier. And now they seem to be coming up with more and more frequency, and I've wishing I had kind of noted them when they came up earlier. I think, though, my impression of Tolkien fans, and again, I've never been one, but I've known a lot of them, is that they read and they reread these books, and perhaps a lot of these details become clearer as you reread them. And again, even though I'm getting a late start in these books, maybe it would be fun to reread them after maybe I've completed the trilogy, or maybe after I've read this Silmarillion or some of this other stuff. I don't know. But yeah, for the time being, it is. Well, it's engrossing to get into this whole mythical history of Middle Earth as you're reading this book. Okay, I've blabbered on for 30 minutes, and that is that's a time limit I usually like to set for myself on these weekly reading vlogs. So I will close out here. Sometime in the very near future, probably within 24 hours or 36 hours, I'll post a review of The Road to Oz. And then, then I'll be back next week with another weekly reading vlog.